Okay, we made it to staining. If you're watching this, I'm hoping your wood is sanded up to about 180. It's clean, there's no scratch marks, it's dust free, it is ready for stain. This is not going to be a comprehensive video on wood staining and all the different kinds. I'm going to show you what I do. I'll give you some resources along the way, so if you want to do more research about this on your own, I'll give you my 2 favorite resources. But essentially what I'm doing here is I'm applying Old Masters gel stain. Why this stuff? I like the viscosity of it. I like how it's not runny like the common mid-wax stain, which means it doesn't penetrate super deeply into the wood. Why is that a good thing? Because in splotch-prone woods, the more the stain penetrates, the more risk you have of seeing those splotches. So this is a good mix to me of getting into the wood in a nice way and really enhancing the beauty, but not overly risky. It's also really easy to apply. You apply it with a rag and it reaches its saturation point almost immediately. So you can wipe it on, and then some stains you have to wait 10-15 minutes, or at least they recommend, before you wipe it off. This, immediately wipe on, it's saturated, you get it off within a minute, and it's fine. You can move on. A brief note about wood conditioners, sealing in woods with products like a shellac seal coat. I don't use those in a process like this. The reason I got so picky about the sanding process is because I believe that really evens out the wood mechanically. It brings it all to one level surface where the pores are all open at the same level. Sanding, as you move up the grits, it gradually closes the pores of wood. 100 grit, the wood is more coarse than 180 grit. So I think when you get it to about 180 grit, the wood is still open, but it's not so open that it's going to really allow anything to penetrate super deeply and show any lurking splotch marks. That's kind of what these liquid products do, these wood conditioners, these seal coats. It provides a barrier so that nothing penetrates into the wood too deeply. 2 great resources. There's a YouTuber called The Wood Whisperer, and he has an episode, it's number 73. Just Google Wood Whisperer splotch prone woods. I believe it's number 73. He provides a really, really good explanation. I learned a lot from that video. And then a book is Flexner on Finishing, one of the most clear-cut, concise explanations of anything finishing you could ever want. So if you want to go down the rabbit hole, those 2 resources. My explanation was just the rationale for what I'm recommending right here. So as you can see, I have a glove on. This stuff is oil-based. You don't really want it all over your hands. It's hard to get off. Usually I wear a mask when I'm doing this all day, because this stuff is heady. If you fill a room with this off-gassing, it's going to go to your head and it's not healthy. So I'm going to show you just how quick and easy it is to apply this gel stain to this open wood. Okay, so close up, bird's eye a little bit. I keep one really saturated rag in here while I'm doing this, and you can apply this stuff really liberally. Just flood it on. This is the fun part. If you got here, you earned this. And you'll notice I don't have the glass taped. I don't have the sides of the window taped. And that's because that's a waste of time with this. It doesn't actually matter if you get it on the glass, because it's not going to absorb and discolor the glass. And you're also going to come back and wipe it off in a few minutes anyway, so it's not going to dry. So don't waste your time with tape. Another thing is, if you tape it, you might get a little hairline. You might get a hairline section of wood adjacent to the glass that gets covered by the tape and doesn't get stained. And that would look bad. So don't do that. I give you permission to be messy. Now I'm putting this on really liberally without a whole lot of care. And that's kind of refreshing, because to get here, we had to use so much care. We had to think about the directionality of our sanding in relation to the grain. We had to be really finicky. This is the screw it part. This is like, if you did your due diligence with your sanding, you can't lose with this stuff unless you really try. Remember, just because, you know, I have time to talk right now, there's an upper limit to how much this stuff can saturate this wood, because with that 180 grit sandpaper, we have closed off the pores. Only so much can get in. We're letting in enough to make the wood look beautiful, but not so much that the stain is penetrating to a depth to really extract, or to show any of those splotches we don't want. So, saturated rag, what, 2 minutes, got it all on there. This isn't like Minwax. You don't need to let this stuff sink in. It already has reached the saturation point. You're not gonna get this round much past this. So, you know, what I like to do is just, with this really saturated rag, once you think you have it, go over everything again, really get into the corners there. But you don't have to obsess. That goes there. Now you should have a couple other rags on hand at various stages of use. I'm gonna use this one. There's some stain on it, but not a ton. And the first task is mopping up the excess. I start with the glass. And just get any globs, get any heavy build, get that all out of the way. Anything you got on the sides of the window, any globs, get that off. Anywhere there's like a 90-degree angle, usually there's gonna be some excess to get off. But don't obsess on this one. And another cool thing, you don't have to worry about wiping off too much. The stain already has gone in as far as it wants. The wood has retained that. And unless you really, really buff with a coarse rag, you're not taking it out. So that's the second pass. Again, every time you're done with a rag, it goes in a metal bucket with water, and that goes outside. Next thing I like to do is take a pretty clean rag, and I like to use this thin 6-inch drywall knife. And what I do with that is I get it into the corners, and that gets any stain that got trapped in any of those 90-degree angles, that gets it out. If you remember in my sanding episode, if you watched that, there was a point where I was talking about making sure to sand this little right angle before the round over, because if you don't, stain's gonna collect too much there and look dark. Even if you do sand it well and you let stain accumulate at 90-degree angles, you run the risk of that dark line happening anyway. So again, in the corners, getting a putty knife in there, and then as I go down this line, I just kind of have my finger, like a fingernail, going through the glove into the rag, and I'm making sure there's not excess stain sitting there. Okay. And if I'm feeling really nitpicky, which I usually am, I'll take a perfectly clean one, buff that glass off, make sure there's nothing in the corners. I don't get too obsessive about the glass right now. I clean all windows I work on, I clean the glass out of on them with a cleaner after I reinstall. So any haze that's left over from that will go away. So that's it. That is the really satisfying and pretty quick staining process. Didn't take that long. Usually when I'm going at production level, I have several in a row, and I'll flood a few and then I'll run back and mop a few up. This stuff has a pretty good open time, so you can really do that. So that's the first coat. Another thing I didn't mention is that You need to do a lot of testing before you start throwing stain onto the stuff that you've worked so hard to prep. So test on the same wood species, the same cut of wood if you can, and do the same prep, sand this test piece to 180 and just do various flavors of whichever stain you want to use, whether it's some Minwax liquid stuff or this. Test, because the worst thing is doing all this hard work, sanding something, and then applying the wrong stain and just realizing at that point that it doesn't look great. So do your due diligence so that by the time you get prepped, you can just hit the ground running and start staining. This is actually going to be a two-part stain thing for me. What I found as I consulted with the clients and we picked a color that they wanted, it turns out that the thing that matches with everything they want is Early American as the first layer and Cedar as the second layer. Now, did I try to mix the two and do it in one? Yes. Did it have the same effect? No. I don't know why, but it just didn't. So this is a two-part staining process. I'm not going to show the second part. It's the same exact thing as this. But know that sometimes, especially when you work with gel stains, it's advantageous to mix them and layer them, and you can get really, really cool effects. But it all goes back to testing. So do that.
Alright, so since I'm new at this whole video production thing, I forgot to shoot an outro to this portion on site. So I'm back in my office, my little Shop of Horrors office. That's Zeus behind me. But anyway, outro to the video. Thanks for watching the staining portion. I hope it was informative. If you have different methods to achieve a great finish in other ways, less laborious ways, I'm all ears. I want to hear about what other people are doing. Or if you have any questions or clarifications on my explanations, leave them in the comments section. The next phase is going to be polyurethaning, where the magic really happens, so stick around in this playlist to see how I wrap up this project. Thanks again.